Myths of the Mundas, Part 1. A Werewolf's Confession by Captain Philmont of the Oldgate Lancers, Daggerfall Covenant Army. The prisoner called for me today, and I had the dubious privilege of listening to his confession. Separated from him by narrow iron bars that I knew would be insufficient to protect me, I took down his words with a trembling hand. What follows is my best rendering, although he was so soft-spoken that at times I had to guess at his precise words. Nevertheless, I am confident that what follows accurately represents the substance of our conversation. I accepted this curse at a young age. I was impressionable. My pack leader was a family friend and an elder in our village. I wanted to be strong. I relished the strength that the curse gave me. I would not have called it a curse back then. But with youth comes recklessness, and I was not good at disguising what I was. Eventually they discovered my true nature, and I was driven from the village. My pack leader failed me. He did not protect me. He cared too much about his own status to risk it for my safety. And I was alone. And everywhere I went I heard the shouts of crowds, saw the bright torches of the angry mob, never lingered long in one place before my secret was discovered. I came to hate them, the superstitious villagers. I came to resent what I couldn't have. I blamed them for my own recklessness. It was not the curse that plagued me, but the narrow-mindedness of those provincial men and women. I was afraid to hunt, and so I was always hungry, and the hunger turned me feral. It was in this state that I came across them, a family of innocent farmers, just like the innocent farmers that had hounded me from the village after village. My vision turned red, and I flew into a fury, and at last my hunger was satisfied. But when the rage subsided, and I looked on what I'd done, my stomach turned. This was what all those villagers were afraid of when they tormented me with their torches and their sickles. That's when I acknowledged my curse, for that's what it was. I have hunted many years since, afraid to turn myself in, but disgusted at my base impulses. You don't realize what a great favour you've done by capturing me. And then, after having told his story, the creature, looking very much like a man, begged me to put him out of his misery. Before the Ages of Man, the Dawn Era, by Icantar of Shimmerine. Before man came to rule Tamriel, and before the chronicles of the historians recorded the affairs of the rulers of Tamriel, the events of our world are known only through myths and legends, and through the divinely inspired teachings of the 8 divines. For convenience, historians divide the distant ages of prehistory into 2 broad periods, the Dawn Era and the Mytheric Era. The Dawn Era is that period of time before the beginning of mortal time, when the feats of the gods take place. The Dawn Era ends with the exodus of the gods and magic from the world at the founding of the Adamantine Tower. The term Mytheric comes from the Nords, literally, the era of elves. The Mytheric Era is the prehistory time, after the exodus of the gods and the magic from the world, and the founding of the Adamantine Tower, and before the arrival of Isgramor, the Nord in Tamriel. The following are the most notable events of the Dawn Era, presented roughly in sequence, as must be understood by creatures of time such as ourselves. The cosmos, formed from the Arubis, chaos or totality, by Anu and Padme. Akatosh, or Oriel, formed and time began. The gods, Atada, formed. Lorcan convinced or tricked the gods into creating the mortal plane Nirn, and the mortal plane was at this point highly magical and dangerous, as the gods walked the physical makeup of the mortal plane, and even the timeless continuity of existence became unstable. When magic, Magnus, architect of the plans for the mortal world, decided to terminate the project, the gods convened at the Adamantine Tower, the Doreni Tower, the oldest known structure in Tamriel, to decide what to do. Most left when magic did. Others sacrificed themselves into other forms so that they might stay, such as the Elenfae. Lorcan was condemned by the gods to exile in the mortal realms, and his heart was torn out and cast from the tower. Where it landed, a volcano formed, and with magic, in the mythic sense, gone, the cosmos stabilized. Elven history, finally linear, began Mythic Era 2500. Before the Ages of Man, the Mytheric Era, by Ankantar of Shimmerine. The Mytheric Era was figured by early Nord scholars as a series of years numbered in reverse order backwards from their beginning of time, the founding of the Cameron dynasty recorded as year 0 of the First Era. The prehistoric events of the Mytheric Era are listed here with their traditional Nord Mytheric dates. The earliest Mytheric date cited by King Harold scholars was ME 2500, the Nord reckoning of the first year of time. As such, the Mytheric Era extends from ME 2500 in the distant past to ME 1, the year before the founding of the Cameron dynasty and the establishment of the White Gold Tower as an independent city-state. According to King Harold's bards, ME 2500 was the date of the construction of the Adamantine Tower on Balfira Island in High Rock, the oldest known structure of Tamriel. This corresponds to the earliest historical dates given in various unpublished Elven chronicles. During the early Mytheric Era, the aboriginal beast peoples of Tamriel, the ancestors of the Khajiit, Argonian orcs, and other beast folk, lived in pre-literate communities throughout Tamriel. In the Middle Mytheric Era, the Aldmeri refugees, mortals of Elven origin, left their doomed, now lost continent of Aldmeris, also known as Old Elenfae, and settled in southwestern Tamriel. The first colonies were distributed at wide intervals on islands along the entire coast of Tamriel, and later inland settlements were founded primarily in fertile lowlands in southwest and central Tamriel. Wherever the beast folk encountered the elves, the sophisticated, literate, technologically advanced Aldmeri cultures displaced the primitive beast folk into the jungles and marshes and mountains and wastelands. The Adamantine Tower was rediscovered and captured by the Doreni, a prominent and powerful Aldmeri clan. They built the Crystal Tower on Somerset Isle and later the White Gold Tower in Cyrodiil. During the Middle Mytheric Era, Aldmeri explorers mapped the coasts of Vardenfell, building the First Era High Elven Wizard Towers at Ald Redania, Balfell, Tel Arun, Tel Mora in Morrowind. It was also during this period that the Aeliad, the wild elven settlements, flourished in the heartland surrounding the White Gold Tower in present-day Cyrodiil. Wild elves, also known as the Heartland High Elves, preserved the Dawn-era magics and the language of the Elenfae. Ostensibly a tributary to the High King of Alinor, the Heartland's long lines of communication from the Somerset Isles sovereignty effectively isolated Cyrodiil from the High Kings at the Crystal Tower. The late Middle Mytheric Era is a period of the High Velothi culture. The Khyma ancestors of the modern Dunmer, or Dark Elves, were dynamic, ambitious, long-lived elven clans devoted to the fundamentalist ancestor worship. The Khyma clans followed the prophet Veloth out of the ancestral elven homelands in the southwest to settle in the lands now known as Morrowind. Despising the secular culture and profane practices of the Dwemer, the Khyma also coveted the lands and resources of the Dwemer, and for centuries provoked them with minor raids and territorial disputes. The Dwemer, or Dwarves, free-thinking, reclusive elven clans devoted to the secrets of science, engineering, and alchemy, established underground cities and communities in the mountain range, later the Velothi Mountains, separating modern Skyrim from Morrowind. The late Metheric era marks the precipitous decline of Velothi culture. Some Velothi settled in villages near declining and abandoned Velothi towers. During this period, Velothi High culture disappeared on Vardenfell Island. The earliest Dwemer freehold colonies date from this period. Degenerate Velothi devolved into tribal cultures, which in time either evolved into modern great houses of Morrowind or persisted as the barbarian Ashlander tribes. The only surviving traces of this tribal culture are scattered Velothi towers and Ashlander nomads on Vardenfell Island. The original First Era High Elven Wizarding Towers along the coast of Tamriel were also abandoned around this time. In the late Metheric era, pre-literate humans, the so-called Nedic peoples, migrated from the continent of Atmora, also Altmora or the Elderwood in Aldmeris, and settled in northern Tamriel. The Nord cultural hero Isgramor, leader of the great colonizing fleet Tamriel, is credited with the development of a runic transcription of Nord speech based on Elvish principles, and so Isgramor is considered the first human historian. Isgramor's fleet landed at Hasaric's Head, at the extreme northern tip of Skyrim's Broken Cape. The Nords built the legendary city of Sarthal there. The elves drove the men away during the Night of Tears, but Isgramor soon returned with his 500 companions. Also, during the late Metheric era, a legendary immortal hero, warrior, sorcerer, and king, variously known as Pellinor Whitestrake, Harold Harrybreeks, Izmir, and Hans the Fox, wandered Tamriel. He gathered armies, conquered lands, ruled them, and then abandoned his kingdoms so he could go and wander again. I hope you've been enjoying these lore readings, and if you have, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.